Thank you. Chairman Goodlad, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you very much for inviting me to testify at today's hearing. My name is David Chavern, and I'm the President and CEO of the News Media Alliance, a nonprofit trade association representing over 2,000 news organizations across the United States and the world. Our members include some of the largest news organizations covering events around the globe, as well as local publications focusing on issues that impact communities and daily lives and citizens of every state. Quality journalism is essential to a healthy and functioning democracy, and my members are united in their desire to fight for its future. Too often in today's information-driven environment, news is included in the broad term of digital content. It's actually much more important than that. While low-quality entertainment or posts by your friends might be disappointing, inaccurate information about the world can be immediately destructive. Civil society depends on the availability of real, accurate news. The internet represents an extraordinary opportunity for broader understanding and education. We have never been more interconnected or had easier access to information or quicker communication. However, as currently structured, the digital ecosystem gives tremendous viewpoint control and economic power to a very small number of companies. That control and power must come with new responsibilities. Historically, newspapers controlled the distribution of their product. They invested in the journalism and then printed it in a form that could literally be handed to their readers directly. No other party decided who got access to the information or on what terms. The distribution of online news is now dominated by the major technology platforms. They decide what news is delivered and to whom, and they control the economics of digital publishing. The First Amendment prohibits the government from regulating the press, but it does not prohibit Facebook and Google from acting as de facto regulators of the news business. Neither Google nor Facebook are or have ever been neutral pipes. To the contrary, their businesses depend on their ability to make nuanced decisions through sophisticated algorithms about how and when content is delivered. The term algorithm itself makes these decisions seem scientific and neutral. The fact is that while their decision process may be highly automated, both companies make extensive editorial decisions about relevance, newsworthiness, and other criteria. The business models of Facebook and Google are complex and varied. However, we do know that they are both immense advertising platforms that sell people's time and attention. Their secret algorithms, and they are secret, are used to cultivate that time and attention, and we have seen many examples of the types of content favored by these systems, namely clickbait and anything that can generate outrage, disgust, passion. Their systems also favor giving users information very similar to what they had previously consumed, thereby generating intense filter bubbles, undermining common understandings of issues and challenges. All of these things are antithetical, actually, to a healthy news business and a healthy democracy. Good journalism is factual, verified, and takes into account multiple points of view. It takes a lot of time and investment. Most particularly, it requires someone to take responsibility for what's published. Whether or not one agrees with a particular piece of journalism, my members at least put their names on the product and stand behind it. Readers know where to send their complaints. The same cannot be said about the sea of bad information that is delivered by platforms in paid priority over my members' quality information. Honorable members of this committee, too much is riding on these issues to let them pass without action. The major technology platforms are no longer new or inconsequential. The choices they make have tremendous influence on the sustainability of the news business and many other industries across our economy. We offer no easy answers as to the ultimate regulation of these companies. In many ways, they present absolutely novel challenges to policymakers. However, with respect to the topic of today's hearing, a strong first step would be a simple acknowledgement of the immense filtering and decision-making power that both companies possess and exercise today. Neither company is neutral, and it's wrong to pretend they are. And from that flows a clear need for both companies to have enforceable standards on their algorithmic decision-making, particularly as to fairness and openness, and systems and policies that reward original quality information and content provided by trusted news organizations employing professional journalists. With respect to the latter, we wish to express strong support for H.R. 5190, the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act of 2018, recently introduced by Representative David Cicilline. We believe this bill would go a long way towards reducing the imbalances in the current system of content distribution. Thank you very much.
Right now, citizens can hold newspapers and other media groups legally accountable if they do certain things in their newspaper, whether it's publishing false information, showing indecent content, that use materials or photos they're not authorized or did not pay to use, and so on. Tech platforms are currently making in-depth decisions, like newspapers make, about what information users receive and how they receive it, often driven by financial and other unknown motives. So Mr. Zuckerberg himself has repeatedly said that his platform is responsible for the content that they host. Should the tech platforms be subject to the same content regulations and civil penalties and libel and slander that those who produce the content are responsible for?
Well, thank you very much. I think we all have to acknowledge that these are novel businesses, right? People say, are they media companies, are they publishers? They're really attention businesses. They want more of your attention, and they will feed information to get more of that attention. I think we all have to be concerned about paths that would lead to them having more overt control over content or being in the content businesses. I'm not sure I'm excited about.
How do we avoid that?
Well, I think we can start by making them responsible for the power and decisions they have today.
And how do we do that?
We'll start by the algorithms, as we say, these rules that they determine. They sort of talk broadly about them, but nobody really knows what's in them. They are secret rules, and if you have secret rules, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. I think they have to start by being much more transparent about their decision-making and actually having enforceable standards about that decision-making, about things like fairness and openness. That's the first place to start, because that's what they do today, and you have to be responsible for what they can do today, and they're really not. They have rules that nobody knows what they are. They have impacts that we can only vaguely tease out. They have to be responsible for their moderation of. So
should that come about by legislative action or by judicial decisions based upon breach of contract or libel or slander or?
I think, frankly, there are many ways to get there, but we're going to keep having hearings like this as long as nobody knows how the secret rules are being applied, right? If you have secret rules, you're always not going to get the benefit of the doubt. And we're going to have to, either through legislation or through their own actions, or could be other options, get to where there's much more transparency about their decision-making. They're responsible for prioritizing quality content that is indicators of trust and not other kinds of content, and ultimately answerable for these decisions they make, because currently, right now, they're not. I mean, we're just sort of guessing about what their algorithms do.
Thank you. Mr. Nadler.
If they are publishers, and a number of, all of our witnesses have acknowledged the role that the technology companies play in distributing news. If they are distributing news, do they have some editorial responsibility to ensure that this type of, in this case, of the manipulated images, that this never appears, and that the invocation of Nazi imagery also not appear? Is there any obligation to do that?
Well, they express editorial control, and this gets to the heart of my testimony in the sense that that kind of content, through propulsion in the algorithms, crowds out the content of my members. Crowds out, by the way, the journalism that was done in your community about what happened, such that there is a built-in preference for content that drives attention but may not be accurate or correct.
Just last question. Is it censorship to expect that this image, this false image, be taken down the moment it appears?
I think I would come at it differently in that I think there's a responsibility to give at least much emphasis on content from responsible sources than to what we have is the opposite, is highlighting irresponsible sources.
Irresponsible and
I'm a
dangerous.
gentleman, it's expired.
My question to Mr. Chavern, did I say that correctly? Today, I've had and I apologize, there's a lot of hearings going on right now, so you've seen members come and go. But I had the opportunity to hear firsthand from Michael Galvin and Bro Croft, the president and editor respectively, of my hometown paper in Montgomery, Alabama, the Montgomery Advertiser. And as members of the News Media Alliance, they have shared with me some of the concerns that you expressed in your testimony today, and I'd like to ask you to use the remainder of my time to expand upon how apps and tech platforms are impacting local and regional journalism. With that said, before I turn it over to you to finish out my time, I just think that this is a very important conversation again, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I hope that this is the beginning of more conversations, as we have seen across many different platforms. As technology continues to progress, it's important that Congress is listening and taking note. And so I'll leave you the rest of my time to expand upon your testimony, but although the chairman's not here, he knows that I hope that we will continue to have more conversations along these lines. And again, I thank you each for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Fundamentally, as the communications and media world is progressing, Google and Facebook are the primary distribution mechanisms for news online. That's how people get their news. And but the rules under which Google and Facebook manage their content emphasize low quality news options and make it very difficult for people who are actually in the business of journalism and paying journalists and doing real reporting for making that a sustainable business. And if present trends continue, you have these huge incentives for really low quality, bad information online that pushes out actually verified quality journalism. And that's not just bad for our business, right? That is extremely bad for our civil society. We'll get to a place, people's curiosity about the world, what's happening in their communities, will always be there. The question is, what will satisfy it? Will actually professional journalism satisfy it, or will it be free garbage that feeds inherent need for people to feel passionate and angry about something?
So setting a good example, my time is about to expire, but again, I look forward to continuing this conversation down the road. And again, I appreciate you all being here today.
Chairman, I'd like to first associate myself with the remarks of many of my colleagues that the Judiciary Committee that has the responsibility of addressing legislation to protect the special counsel investigation, comprehensive immigration reform, common sense gun safety legislation, protecting our electoral system, and criminal justice reform, just to name a few. And we can't seem to get a hearing and a serious examination of any of those issues, but here we are today. And it has been 2 weeks since Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg appeared before our colleagues in the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate Committee on Commerce, and the House Committee on Energy and Commerce in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. It's been over a month since Facebook met with our staff and left many questions related to this scandal unanswered. As I noted in the context of a request that Mr. Zuckerberg appear before this committee on this matter, Facebook's breach of America's trust is a direct consequence of its dominance online that must be investigated by this committee. More than 200 million Americans have Facebook accounts, and 3/4 of them visit the site daily. And more than half of Americans access news through Facebook and its subsidiaries, Instagram and WhatsApp, and it controls nearly 1/4 of the digital advertising market, which is highly concentrated. Facebook also collects and mines every person's data across the internet, even for people without Facebook accounts, and creates shadow profiles with untold data points about people who have deleted their accounts or never signed up for Facebook in the first place. At the same time, Facebook has become too big and complex for any executive team to manage responsibly and has provided a backdoor through which America's enemies can attack our vital social and democratic institutions, as the nonpartisan Open Markets Institute has noted. We should have an active role in examining these issues to ensure that our system of competition is working effectively. Increasingly, it's clear that privacy and competition are interdependent conditions for protecting rights online. Rather than examining these serious issues and considering legislation intended to address these concerns, this committee is holding a hearing intended to perpetuate an entirely debunked narrative about 2 online social media personalities. This is a sad day for our committee. Nonetheless, I will do my best in my questionings to make this time useful. And so I want to turn first to you, Mr. Chavern. I'd like to begin by asking you about the impact of Facebook's gatekeeper power over Americans' access to trustworthy sources of news. And thank you for your reference to our legislation. And what effect does this centralization of America's access to quality journalism have on public trust, the marketplace of ideas, and our democracy? And I know you represent a number of publications around the country, so your views on this are particularly important.
Great, thank you very much. If I could give you an example, recently Facebook announced that they were going to give, quote unquote, higher priority to, quote unquote, local news. That may or may not be a good thing. It will certainly change the news that people are exposed to, and it will have economic impacts, maybe good or bad, on a whole range of publishers. What don't we know? We don't know what priority means. Is it a little bit or a lot? How does that work? We don't know what local means, by the way. And we have no say or insight or ability to have a conversation about it. They establish the rules in very vague ways and then apply them to, in particular, what I care about, the news publishing business, and change the news experience for citizens across the U.S.
And how would the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act, which I introduced and you referenced, allow publishers to band together to negotiate with platforms to improve the quality, accuracy, attribution, and interoperability of news, help protect the free and diverse press?
Well, the one great thing we do as an industry is we provide a lot of great quality content onto the platforms. One thing we can't do under the current law is collectively talk to them about things like what just happened with the algorithm. And the Act would allow us to do that and even the playing field, even just somewhat, to a better future for journalism.
Thank you.
I think, listen, these companies have rules that prioritize some kinds of speech and not others. And they're allowed to have the rules, right? But you're also allowed to ask how the rules work and ask if they're fair and what impacts they have on society. And these are not startup companies anymore. They're massive enterprises that control people's access to.
Aren't they effectively monopolies? Don't they have monopolistic power? If you're not on Facebook, you may in fact be unelectable or unheard of and the like?
Well, there's definitely an argument that their access to data makes it very hard for anybody to compete with them. Right? How are you ever going to get enough data to compete with them? But the reality, just look at the facts of the role they play in the economy. Look at the facts of the role they play in the news business. They're the primary distribution mechanism online between news publishers and readers. And the rules decide how that news is delivered.